Hey everybody, hope you're doing well on this Thursday. Here with another of our NFL preview shows. We'll be back to regular programming tomorrow. It's been a little bit of a quiet week. Been doing a lot of just studying and working on these previews, and I enjoy doing them. Hope you guys enjoy listening to them. So I do AFC North today. We'll do a show going into the weekend tomorrow. We'll have lots to talk about. We got the start of the FedEx Cup playoffs on the PGA Tour, a big weekend in MMA for the UFC, some fight announcements that we'll talk about tomorrow. The National Bank Open, the tennis tournament's been very interesting so far. Very fun with a great match between Leylah Andy Fernandez and Beatrice. I did Maya last night and went late, but some good stuff, some upsets. Tsitsipas goes out. Holger Rune gets bounced to Andrei Rublev. So 3 of the top 10 seeds are out. Milos Raonic is on an incredible start to his tournament, so we'll talk about that tomorrow. And also a lot of baseball to catch up on. The Jays are winning games. Trouble for the Tampa Bay Rays with Shane McClanahan, amongst other things. And the Houston Astros are looking like a great team again. The Mariners and Texas Rangers are red hot. So that's all going to come tomorrow. But today we're talking about the AFC North. A division that is loaded, in my opinion. A division that has really great teams at the top. But I look at all 4 of these teams in this division, and they all certainly could make a case for being a playoff team. The Cleveland Browns, which is where we're going to start, have been described as a cursed franchise. They had the number 1 overall pick, and they took Baker Mayfield. And it worked for a bit until it didn't. Injuries, inconsistent play, and Baker was shipped to Carolina. So Cleveland was in this sense of desperation. They needed to do something. They needed a quarterback. They have hired Kevin Stefanski, a good offensive mind, to be their head coach. They still have a roster that has a lot of talent on it, that you look at the team and say, this team can be competitive. And a year and a half ago now, they heard that Deshaun Watson was available because Houston wanted out of the Deshaun Watson business. Deshaun Watson was accused by over 20 women of sexual misconduct, sexual assault, massages. You know the story. And despite Deshaun saying he did not want to go to Cleveland, they offered him the most guaranteed money, $240 million, in the history of the NFL. So he changed his tune and said, screw you, Atlanta, I'm going to Cleveland. It was a stunner. It was a huge swing for the Cleveland Browns, and they took the PR hit, knowing that Deshaun Watson would not be available for the first 8 games of the season last year. So they brought in Jacoby Brissett. He played pretty well in relief. They used their running game with the best running back in football, and Nick Chubb. And they battled. They were in playoff contention when Deshaun Watson returned. But oddly enough, when Deshaun Watson returned, the team averaged 30 less yards per game on offense. Their offense got worse. He played awful. And the team ultimately missed out on making the playoffs. This year is the first year of the Deshaun Watson experience. It's interesting because I throw out last year, and I hate Deshaun Watson. I'm not a fan. I think he's a scumbag personally. But when he played in Houston, those first couple years, coming out of Clemson, where he made it to back-to-back national championship games, winning one against Alabama, it's hard to argue that he wasn't a top 5 talent at the position. But injuries, legal stuff, he hasn't played all that much. We haven't seen him. But now he comes into this season with a Cleveland team that should be motivated to be competitive, with pressure from ownership. Kevin Stefanski, who's been around a minute, he's gotten more leash than most head coaches get. And I think he comes into the season on the hot seat. If something good doesn't happen, he very well could be out on his ass looking for another job. So what did Cleveland do in the offseason to improve the roster? Well, they played around on the edges, is what I would say about the Cleveland Browns. First off, they traded for Zadarius Smith from the Minnesota Vikings. A good trade. He had 10.5 sacks last year after being cut from the Green Bay Packers. He is a good pass rusher, something they need somebody to pair alongside Myles Garrett. So now you have two guys who had over 10.5 sacks last year, and Cleveland had the 27th ranked defense and a 32-team lead. So not very good. They had Dalvin Tomlinson, another guy who's going to help them on the back end. They signed Ethan Piocic, a center formerly of the Saints and Seahawks, has been a Pro Bowler. They signed Juan Thornhill from the Kansas City Chiefs, probably their best signing, in my opinion. He was a huge part of that defense, made them work, and a great talent. And they also brought in Elijah Mitchell, formerly of the San Francisco 49ers, to add to the running back depth after they lost Kareem Hunt. After, not re-signing Kareem Hunt because he remains a free agent. So, this team is Deshaun Watson, but I also think it's been understated how good this team can be. They added Elijah Moore from the Jets, who hasn't really got a great opportunity to be a great wide receiver. Hardly played last year. Requested a trade in the middle of the year, but they did not move him at the trade deadline. He comes to Cleveland with a fresh start. Amari Cooper played well last year with both quarterbacks, in particular with Jacoby Brissett. He still has game. I kind of worried about him leaving the Cowboys but he had 1,160 yards receiving last year and 9 touchdowns. Amari Cooper is still a fringe. I think he is a number 1 receiver, and he can run any route. I like him. They still have Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's a deep threat who can do a number of different things. Marquise Goodwin they added. Anthony Schwartz is I want to see him play more. I loved him at Auburn. Was a really versatile player. He's been in the league a few years. He's had some drop problems. He only had 1 reception all of last year. But to me, he can play. 186 yards in his career, but he can be used in a multitude of different ways. So let's see what they want to do. They still have David Njoku, an underrated tight end in the league who can do everything. But you talked about, I love him in the red zone. Big target, he can catch. So you pair those receivers, and if Deshaun Watson is game, with Nick Chubb, who's the best running back in the NFL. Yes, the running back position is being devalued. It's not what it used to be. But Nick Chubb is still Nick Chubb, and a running game still has its place in the NFL. Nick Chubb averaged the most yards per carry last year, even more than Derrick Henry. Had 1,100 yards had, trying to find Nick Chad, there we go, had 1,525 yards rushing, 12 touchdowns, averaged 5.1 yards per rush on 302 carries. The dude's a straight horse. He might be the strongest person in the NFL. If you've seen him squat, the dude's a freak. So that offense, with those weapons and Deshaun Watson, I didn't find he looked like he was in great shape when he came back. Deshaun Watson used to be able to move around a little bit, used his legs. If you have the creativity that Deshaun Watson used to have, paired with the best running back in football, with Amari Cooper, Njoku, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman could get some snaps. He's a rookie coming over from Tennessee. What I like about this team is, other than Amari Cooper, you don't have another true guy that's proved himself. Elijah Moore has not proven himself at the NFL level. Peoples-Jones, a little more unproven. But you look at the depth. Tillman, rookie, was really good in college. David Bell played at Michigan, dealt with some injuries. He'll be motivated. Goodwin has played a ton of snaps. They have Schwartz, as I mentioned. They also have Jakeem Grant Sr., who was a great punt returner with the Miami Dolphins for a long time before he blew out his Achilles last season. If there's an injury, because there will be, if something happens where guys are going to miss games, they have players that can step in and play, and that's important. So offensively, it's a much better team than it was last year, and Deshaun Watson is coming into a training camp where he knows he's going to be playing week 1. It's not a scenario where, like last year, he's going through training camp, he's going through the motions, he played during the preseason, knowing he won't play until the season's half over. He's the guy from day one. There's no quarterback competition. Josh Dobbs is at camp competing with Kellen Mond and Dorian Thompson-Robinson to be the backup quarterback. But it's Deshaun Watson's team. And another thing I love about Cleveland, their offensive line. Jack Conklin at right tackle, multiple-time Pro Bowler. Wyatt Teller has not been to a Pro Bowl, but is legit. They signed Piocic at center. Is a one-time Pro Bowler, very solid position. Joel Bitonio is the longest tenured Cleveland Brown. He's always available. He always plays well. And then they added a few years ago, they drafted Jedrick Wills Jr. out of Oklahoma. The dude's been phenomenal since coming into the NFL. So I would say the weapons for Deshaun Watson, if I had to give a grade, I would put it at a B, because Amari Cooper is the one guy that I truly trust to be great. But when I went to school, a B was a damn good grade. I would take a B and I'd be perfectly happy with it, in particular in high school. A B excited me. I went home and happy to show a B to my parents because they were okay with a B. A B also says that you're kind of learning and maybe you can get better. Now, there's also the case you can go down to a C, which happened with me often. But you're learning, you're getting better, you're understanding the material. If some of these talented prospects, like Cedric Tillman, Elijah Moore, they can learn the offense, they can get into a gel with Deshaun Watson, this team can be dangerous and can be a threat. Because I think this team's going to run the ball really well. Not just Nick Chubb's great, he's hard to tackle, but also because this offensive line is really good. Deshaun Watson shouldn't be sacked all that much if this offensive line is playing the way we expect them to. He only had 7 touchdown passes last year. That number is going to go way, way up. So offensively, I think they've done a really good job at building a good team around Deshaun. Is it perfect? No. But they have some weapons, and they could only spend so much money on their weapons because they're paying Deshaun Watson a stupid amount of money to be their quarterback. That was their decision. They gave him $240 million guaranteed when nobody else was going to do it, but they did it because they felt like they had to and they were desperate. Well, the rest of your team suffers because of that, but I'll give them credit in saying that what they've done around the edges to pick around and find Elijah Moore, who the Jets had to move because they had too many weapons after acquiring some of Aaron Rodgers' must-haves. They've done a good job with it. So in particular, I think this offense is a strength. It's all on Deshaun Watson. It's all on him to be what he used to be. And we'll see. He hasn't owned anything that he's done wrong, but it doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player in the NFL. Because bad people succeed. Defensively, like I said, they were a bottom 5 defense last year in the NFL. They still have Myles Garrett, who is one of the best DNs in football. 16 sacks last year, 2 forced fumbles, 37 solo tackles. He gets doubled a lot, and he still had 16 sacks. He's a gamer. He balls out. It's not uncommon to see him have 2 sack games. I love Myles Garrett. Truly one of the best defensive players in the entire league. I'll take him on my team any day. Like I said, they added Dalvin Tomlinson at D tackle. He played in Minnesota for a long time. He's not a guy that's going to get a whole lot of sacks. He's kind of like a Vita Vea for Tampa Bay, where he'll be in the middle of that defense, help in the run game, block it up a little bit. He's not a great player, but he helps a defense that needed it. Zadarius Smith, as I said, 10 sacks, 1 forced fumble. So there's 26 sacks between Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith, and they're on the same team now, coming at you. So if you double Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith's going to get solo, and he'll take advantage of that. They added Anthony Walker Jr. from Indianapolis. Still have Denzel Ward at corner. As I mentioned, Juan Thornhill, Greg Newsome II out of Northwestern. Grant Delpit in his 3rd season now out of LSU. This secondary should be really good. And I listen to people talk about the NFL who are smarter than me, like Mina Kimes, and she says, this secondary should have been really good last year, and it wasn't for some reason. Denzel Ward is incredibly talented. He takes on the hard matchup. He's not afraid of it. And he had a decent year last year with 3 interceptions and 15 passes defended. And he's been a good player since coming out of Ohio State. But there's times he can get caught. Grant Delpit, I think, is the biggest guy that people had a lot of expectations for him. And he's been underwhelming since coming into the league. He did have 4 interceptions last year, but it was some of the bigger plays he gave up. I'm banking on this defense being better because year to year things change. Year to year things happen. The league doesn't stay the same. And you look at the team now, they added Jim Schwartz as their defensive coordinator. They fired, obviously, their defensive coordinator. Jim Schwartz, he had some good defenses in Detroit when he had Stafford and Megatron. He's worked for the Eagles. He was the Eagles' defensive coordinator when they won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. He's an experienced coach in the league. He's been there, done that, and he took some time off from coaching. He returns now with the Cleveland Browns. He's a hard-nosed coach, and I think he's going to expect a lot out of this defense. But I look at Garrett, Tomlinson, Zadarius Smith, Walker Jr. I like. Taki, their linebacker, fun player. They have nowhere to go but up. I'm going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings later in the week when I do the NFC North Preview. They have a new defensive coordinator. They had a horrible defense. I expect their defense to be better. Just by a new coordinator, just by a few different additions. I can't say it's a strength because we haven't seen it yet. What they've done to improve it should help. And if the offense doesn't turn the ball over, you have good ball control with Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson, then it should help you, right? That's the way I look at it. So, I mean, there's nowhere to go but up for some of these. There were playoff teams last year, fringe playoff teams, that did not have a good defense. And that's the side of the ball they're trying to get better at. Cleveland is certainly one of those teams. Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, I think they will get pressure on the quarterbacks, and I believe that they will generate sacks. In particular in this division that we're going to talk about, because I don't believe there is a better team in this division with a better offensive line than Cleveland. The AFC, I'm not going to reveal playoff teams yet. Do that closer to the season. That's why I talked about Tennessee, where they might not win their division, but they could sneak into the playoffs because they don't got to play as difficult a schedule as the Browns, as the Bengals, as the Ravens. The AFC East is tough. AFC West. Sometimes it's just about circumstance and who you end up having to play. And for the Browns and for these teams in this division, it's tricky because you got to play against some really good teams. The Browns open up their season hosting the Bengals. There's the Joe Burrow injury. Will he be ready? We'll see, but a division game to start. Then they go to play the Steelers on Monday Night Football, so back-to-back division games. Week 3, they host the Titans. Then they host the Ravens. So they have 3 division games in their first 4 weeks, 2 of them at home. The start of the year is extremely important for the Cleveland Browns if you want to make the playoffs, if you want to have a chance to win your division. Because divisional games, hardly a division that it means more than this one. Because every game is going to matter if you can find a way to win. But I like what Cleveland has done. I think they have a good team, not a great team. Let me rephrase that. If Deshaun Watson is Deshaun Watson in Houston, this team can be great. Because when he was playing in Houston, he was at his apex, fresh out of college, he was one of the best quarterbacks in football. Period. Let's pivot to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers, hard to argue that they have not been the most consistent football team the last decade plus in the NFL. They have never finished under 500 since Mike Tomlin took over as head coach. They make the playoffs more often than not. And to think about what they accomplished, where they had Big Ben for a number of years there, they won the division where they went 13-4 with Big Ben at the end of his career. And yes, they lost to Cleveland in that playoff game. But it was something to behold to see the defenses of Mike Tomlin and the team just rally around the culture and the play that they were as successful as they were with Big Ben on his last legs, literally. But they made the playoffs last year and they lost. And now we're going to see what the Steelers are made of as Kenny Pickett enters year 2 of his career. He started last season on the bench behind Mitch Trubisky. But after a few games, Mitch Trubisky being inconsistent, Kenny Pickett came in and he got some reps down the stretch. He didn't play a whole lot. He had 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, missed a few games with a concussion, and had the 20th QBR in the NFL. I think if you're a fan of the Steelers, you can say that you saw things that you liked. If you hate the Steelers, you can say Kenny Pickett's not a good quarterback. He can be a bust. There's still a lot to be proven. The sample size is very small, and Kenny Pickett enters this season with a lot of pressure, to be fair, with a lot of pressure to be good and to prove what he can do. So what did the Steelers do? Well, in the offseason, they were active. They brought in Patrick Peterson, veteran corner, formerly of Arizona fame, and the last couple years with the Minnesota Vikings. They added Isaac Suamalo to their offensive line, brought in Allen Robinson, who had a disappointing year with the Rams, added Nate Herbig. They drafted him out of the University of Wisconsin. Keanu Neal comes in, Landon Roberts. And I think the Steelers had one of the best drafts in the entire NFL, maybe other than the Eagles. They drafted Broderick Jones to their offensive line, which they need help at, out of Ohio State. They draft Joey Porter Jr., the corner, out of Penn State. And they also get in the 3rd round Darnell Washington, who's a freak, and he's 6'7", 260 plus pounds, playing at Georgia alongside Brock Bowers. He could be the steal of the draft, literally. In the 3rd round, I think the dude has a lot to offer. So, they also lost Cameron Sutton, who was a good corner for a long time. They lose Devin Bush in free agency to the Seahawks. Terrell Edmonds departs the team. That was a bigger loss. And Chase Claypool was traded to the Chicago Bears at the trade deadline. So, what are the strengths of the Steelers? Well, I, for one, like their receiving core. Deontay Johnson and George Pickens are just scratching the surface at what they can be. George Pickens had 52 receptions last year for 801 yards. He's only 22 years old, and he played with Trubisky. He played with Pickett. If he can get some consistency, if he can be into some games where he has a quarterback all the time where they have cohesion, he's going to have way more than 52 catches. This dude's going to be, I think he'll be over 1,000 yards this year. He's too damn talented not to. Deontay Johnson has some drop problems, certainly. He's not a guy that's going to burn you down the field. He only averages 10 yards per catch. But he had 86 catches last year, 882 yards, did not have a touchdown, which was crazy. But he is a perfect guy where it's 3rd and 7. He'll get you 8 yards and a first down and move the sticks. That's just what Deontay Johnson does. That's been his role with the Steelers since he came in. I will say I wish that the offense would open it up a little bit for him. because he does have speed, he does have creativity, and I think they have the option to do it this season because they added Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson's a veteran wide receiver. He'd only had 339 yards receiving last year with the Rams. It was a disaster year for him and for the team. He's only 29, which is shocking to me. I thought he's way older. Played in Jacksonville a long time, had some good years. But to me, he should be the Deontay Johnson, the short yardage, 3rd and 3, get 4 yards, get the first down. And that would be my pick with him, because Deontay Johnson and George Pickens have creativity. It's on the offensive coordinator and that's, I think if you're a Steelers fan, that's the biggest thing you hate about your team, is just how stagnant, just how boring they've been on offense. Matt Canada remains the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I can't believe he is, honestly, even though they did have a good year and they won games and they were competitive. He's just so conservative. He doesn't give his players opportunities to make big plays. And I love the receiving corps. It's a strength, but a weakness for this team is their offensive coordinator. Are you going to be willing to open the playbook up? Your quarterback is not Ben Roethlisberger anymore. It's not Big Ben, who can't move, who has no athleticism, and can't throw the ball 20 yards. Kenny Pickett is 25. He does have a good arm. We saw it in college. He's more athletic than one might think. And allow him to showcase that athleticism. Allow him to run some bootlegs, move the football, find some receivers down the field. So the Steelers could still be competitive with the offense that they run, which is boring, which is mundane, which doesn't take chances, conservative. But if they open up the playbook and they notice that they have some talented players on offense, they are just scratching at the surface at what they can be. Not to mention, sometimes it's, Najee Harris is a good running back. He is. I like him. I think he's the heart and soul of the team. He had over 1,000 yards rushing last year. But he had 3.8 yards per carry. The offensive line is not great on this Steelers team. It's never been a strength. So if you know that, find different ways to run the football. Find different ways to open up your offense. They also have Pat Freiermuth, who's great. He's been awesome since coming in. He did 700 yards receiving last year as a tight end. Love him. And like I said, you also got Darnell Washington to pair with him. Steelers allowed a lot of sacks last year and a lot of pressures. Broderick Jones is number 2 right now on the depth chart behind Dan Moore Jr. I get it. He's 22, and you don't want to rush him, and you don't want to put him in a bad situation. But, I'd play him. He was a high draft pick. You know this. That's just the way I would approach it. But there's that battle in camp. You have Suamalo, who I mentioned they added at left guard. Mason Cole at center. Okorafor. It's not a great offensive line again. I don't think it's a strength of their team. I think it's a weakness, their offensive line. Running the football might be tough. Here's the thing. Here's the X factor. Pat Freiermuth, they love. Red zone, 3rd down. He's one of the best 3rd down receivers in the NFL. And he's a decent blocker. He's not a great one. Darnell Washington is a tight end for me that might have less receiving yards than he did in college. Might not be as looked upon as highly because his numbers aren't as good. And you look at him and go, well, how good was he this year? Well, he only had 454 yards receiving last year. Felt like more. But he averaged 16 yards a catch, which is really good. To me, he is a secret weapon for this team for the offensive line. I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets with Freiermuth and Darnell Washington on the field at the same time. It's going to take some time for him to learn the nuances of the offense, learn who to block, things of that nature. But Darnell Washington should be, a lesser version of George Kittle, a lesser version, maybe like a Patrick Ricard in Baltimore, who's been a fullback tight end, but also just an extra offensive lineman. Help out the team. Notice that the team has a weakness on the offensive line and try to improve it. And if you can get a guy in the 3rd round that helps your offensive line, that does help in the receiving game some, because he will get targets. But if he can block a linebacker who's blitzing, if he can take on and help double team a great pass rusher on the other side, that is money well spent. That's a good draft pick. So that's one for me to watch, is how many snaps does Darnell Washington play? Because Freiermuth is the receiving tight end. That's his position. He's not worried about that leaving when he was drafted. He knows he's going to continue to occupy that position. But can Darnell Washington block, become an extra tight end? It's a job that's thankless. But you look at the greats, Gronk, who's the greatest blocking tight end ever, did it for a long time in New England. And it helped them win. And it helped Tom Brady have an easier life and help the Patriots win Super Bowls. George Kittle has been doing it his whole career. They haven't won a Super Bowl yet, but they've gotten damn close a number of times, and it's what makes him so valuable to that team amongst many other things. So maybe Darnell Washington gets a more prominent role in the receiving game as his career goes on. But to me, he's so big, he's so strong, he's going to be able to take guys maybe even potentially one-on-one and win those battles. And if he can do that for the Steelers, it's a nice find. And if he can do it in the running game, maybe that yards per catch can go up for Najee Harris this season as well. And that becomes more of a threat, because last year they ran the football and it really felt like a waste of a down a lot. 1st and 10, you get 1 yard. 2nd and 9, you're in tough already with the plays that you're drawing up. So if you can help Broderick Jones, if he ends up playing, you help out on either side by blocking some key guys, chip on Myles Garrett, so it takes an extra couple seconds for him to get to your quarterback. That's the X factor to me, because on its face, the Steelers' offensive line is a weakness. It's not a strength. You still look at it and go, you weren't that good last year. A lot of the same names are coming back. Kenny Pickett does have a history now of concussions. He had 2 last year. That's not talked about enough. It's all about Tua. Kenny Pickett had concussion problems. Got one his 2nd start, and then he came back and he got another one. So you need to protect him. He can't be, again, you take so many hits, you go out with concussions, your career's over before it starts. So just something to think about moving forward with the Steelers. I like their team. I don't think Kenny Pickett, like comparing to the first team we talked about, I don't think Kenny Pickett will ever be as good as Deshaun Watson was at his apex. But do I think Kenny Pickett can be a game-managing quarterback that does take some chances and have a long career in the NFL? Yeah. Kirk Cousins played in the league for a long damn time. And he's been pretty successful. He's made it to an NFC championship game. He's been in these situations. So there's opportunity there to have a long career, to be a Phillip Rivers, to be these guys that play a long time. You might not win a Super Bowl, but you play in the league a long time. That's where I view Kenny Pickett and him. But Darnell Washington's a key for me just because I think Pittsburgh has a way of using him if they really think about it. And if they identify their offensive line isn't all that good, help it. Defensively, TJ Watt missed a lot of last season with an injury. Prior to him getting injured, he was having a hell of a year. Had 5.5 sacks, 27 tackles, 1 forced fumble, 2 interceptions. He was playing great. He came back towards the end of the season. But don't worry about him. He'll be great. He was defensive player. It should have been defensive player of the year before. Cam Hayward, getting older, sure. He's 34, but he had 10.5 sacks last year, 39 tackles. The dude can still play. They added Larry Ogunjobi. Not a great guy for sacks, but good in the run defense. Landon Roberts comes over from the Patriots. Cole Holcomb comes over from the Washington Commanders. Mentioned Patrick Peterson. They still have Minkah Fitzpatrick at free safety, who's been a rock star since they made that trade with the Dolphins. And Joey Porter Jr. is their guy, the new corner who they took in the second round. I expect this defense to be pretty good. I expect them to generate pressure. I expect them to take the ball. Minkah Fitzpatrick is a ball hawk. He had another 6 interceptions last year and 11. TJ Watt's a force, and if he plays a full season, he'll have 15 plus sacks. There's a prediction. If he plays every game this year, absolutely 15 plus sacks. I think this team will have over 30, maybe 35 as a team. Worries, Patrick Peterson. Again, he's 33, but he had 5 interceptions last year for the Vikings, although the Vikings were the 27th ranked defense in the entire NFL. So they had their highs and lows. Absolutely. He's not what he used to be, where he was in Arizona, where he was an all-pro guy. Patrick Peterson's playing so long, he might be a Hall of Famer by the time he retires. But this team has potential. Alex Highsmith's another guy. He had 14.5 sacks last year. Really good player. So you put so much pressure on the opposition, on the quarterback. They take hits, you get sacks early. You decide to throw the ball away. Well, they might throw the ball away. They might not want to take that hit. They throw the ball in the air, ends up in an interception. Pittsburgh had the number 10 ranked defense in the NFL last season. I expect them to be good again because I think Joey Porter Jr. is going to be really good right away, even as a rookie. Minkah Fitzpatrick is still in his prime, still playing well. Peterson, I think he'll be okay. Highsmith, Watt, Hayward, they're going to get pressure in the opposition. They will tackle well. Mike Tomlin coaches that side of the ball, so you know they're going to be good. The Steelers are always interesting because you can look at the Steelers every year and say this team isn't all that talented. They don't have that good of a quarterback. And I see Dax Sentley in the comments. Hey man, keep grinding. I'll most definitely drop you a sub. I believe your podcast will be top tier one day. Thank you for that. Appreciate that immensely. Thank you for listening, and thank everybody who listens. Always appreciate the support. So thank you for that message. You can look at the Steelers every year and think this team isn't that good. They don't have that good of a quarterback. How does the talent stack up with the rest of the league? But I never doubt Mike Tomlin. He's never been under 500. He's been in way worse situations than this. There was a point last year I thought this team could be picking in the top 10. They nearly made the playoffs. The defense is really good. Kenny Pickett will get better in year 2 if he can stay healthy. That's always an if for every team. And I don't love their offensive line, but I think they have ways to counteract that at least some of the time. Darnell Washington's not going to be on every snap playing offensive line, an extra offensive lineman. But their front is really good. They're going to generate pressure. So I think this team will be competitive. They'd be competitive in any division. They're not fun to play against. Let's look at their start to this season. The Steelers open against the 49ers. Woof, not a fun start there. Actually, that's not a bad week to get the 49ers because they lost week 1 in Pittsburgh last year. Week 1 in Chicago last year. It was actually a good week to get them. I recant that statement. Then they got the Browns, host the Browns on Sunday Night Football. They go play the Raiders on Sunday Night Football. Weird game. And then they got the Texans. So I think they got an easier schedule to start the year. Not loaded. You have some games in there that you think you can win. So I think the Steelers will be competitive like they always are. And I'll do playoff team predictions as we get closer to the season. But I'm leaning towards the Steelers being a playoff team. Even in this division, which I'm going to have to go through it and do more because I'm doing a lot of research for these podcasts. Been doing my quarterback list, getting that ready. We'll have to go through the schedule and really decide who's going to win games. But the Steelers will be there, as they always are. They'll be in the mix. Let's go down to Maryland. The Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens, who had an interesting offseason where Lamar Jackson was given the franchise tag. None too pleased about that. But after weeks of pontificating, and are they going to get a deal done? Is he going to request a trade? The Ravens and Lamar Jackson came to an understanding. He gets 5 years, $250 million, and he's going to be a Raven for a very long time. So all's well and good in Baltimore. John Harbaugh remains the head coach. They have the same pieces when it comes to management. But they made some decisions this offseason. They made the playoffs with Greg Roman as their offensive coordinator, although Lamar Jackson was injured, not playing. But they still fired Greg Roman, and they brought in Todd Monken to be their new offensive coordinator, who was the offensive coordinator at the University of Georgia the last 2 years, winning back-to-back national champions. So new offense, new creativity, new pair of eyes with Lamar. Lamar has only worked with Greg Roman since coming into the NFL. So that's exciting in and of itself to see what this team does. Not to mention, they signed Odell Beckham Jr., who did not play all of last year. But they bring in OBJ. They draft Zay Flowers out of Boston College. They still have Rashad Bateman. Baltimore has the best weapons in the Lamar Jackson era. They have not had this amount of talent on their roster ever. They built a team around his rushing attack and them running the football, power running, and I don't think Baltimore truly ever appreciated just how good Lamar Jackson was throwing in the pocket, just how good he was at just throwing a ball down the field. This isn't Michael Vick. This isn't a quarterback that can only run the football. In his limited time last season, because of injuries, he had 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and the 9th best QBR in all of football. So yes, can he run the football effectively? Sure he can. It's part of his game. But it's been relied on too much, and their team's been built just by running the football. Bateman, scratching at the surface, still has more. Down the field, intermediate routes, whatever you want. OBJ, another guy who missed a whole year, has a huge chip on his shoulder, wants to be productive. I think he had 537 yards in 2021, 5 touchdowns, was phenomenal in that playoff win with the Rams. He was on his way to winning Super Bowl MVP until he tore his ACL. Zay Flowers, as I mentioned, they still have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, a tight end 1-2 punch that is damn good. Damn good. And you also J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, Melvin Gordon III as at camp. Ravens are a good team. They have options on offense. Different guys for different plays. They also have Duvernay, who will be used on special teams, but he can also go a Y route down the field to the house. He can burn you with the best of them. They have Nelson Aguilar, who's there in camp, another guy who's a deep threat receiver. So they have options. It's not even close to me. This is the best receiving core he's ever played with. And Baltimore, the worry about signing Lamar Jackson is, well, he's been injured. He's not reliable because he's not available. Well, if you have a team where he's not going to be asked to run the football 10 to 15 times a game, if the offense isn't predicated on him being the team's best rusher, if the team isn't predicated on the quarterback not throwing the football from the pocket as much as he should be, maybe the injuries will go down. I'll tell you this, they will certainly be mitigated, because if he's not put in harm's way, then there's less chance for him to be injured. That's just common sense. That's just football 101. And I hope Todd Monken, who's worked with Stetson Bennett, and they ran offenses in Georgia where they were fantastic. They had good talent like Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, and obviously George Pickens was at Georgia. They've had some really good players come through that program and make it to the NFL. And he had a quarterback that was not even 1/5 as dynamic as Lamar Jackson and Stetson Bennett Jr. III. But Stetson Bennett knew how to run the offense. He would run bootlegs. He would throw balls from the pocket, and he would throw accurately. Lamar can. Lamar is one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. There's a little spoiler alert for a future podcast. I don't think he's given enough respect for a number of reasons. Again, I think one reason, bad coordinating, stupid coaching, and not understanding the talent that you have in front of you. 2, because he's black. And 3, because he's a different kind of guy. People are stingy. We have to change our offense. He's not what we're used to. Oh, we're used to this, blah, blah, blah. It's called innovation. Happens every day in society. We're constantly innovating. We went from Twitter to X in goddamn a day. What's the difference? I still don't know. Other than getting more ads about cryptocurrency every other day. Innovation, though. At least Elon's doing something about it. Thanks, Elon. Not really. Not a huge fan, but yeah, you're all right. You build a shitty car, but good on you. But I love the offense that they have. Use it correctly. Use Lamar in the pocket. Don't ask him to run all the time. I love Bateman. OBJ, motivated. Zay Flowers was awesome at Boston College. Yes, he's a rookie. He'll take some time, certainly. But he played at Boston College, where, let me tell you, Boston College, not exactly loaded talent. 1,000 yards receiving last year, 12 touchdowns. An average 13.8 yards a catch, 17 year prior, 15.9. The dude can play. And he's fast, and he can do it all. I like the draft pick. Offensive line-wise, they still have Ronnie Stanley, left tackle. Tyler Linderbaum, who they took 2 years ago out of the University of Iowa at center. Kevin Zeitler, longtime offensive lineman, still very good. Morgan Moses, another veteran. They also have Ben Cleveland. They have some depth. Patrick McCarry behind Ronnie Stanley. I think their offensive line is pretty good. I think their offensive line is good to very good. At its peak, I think that's where they can be. Defensively, I put one of the weaknesses of this team that could very well be a strength for the Baltimore Ravens is, can they sack the quarterback? I worry about that. Broderick Washington, 1 sack last year. Michael Pierce at nose tackle had 0 sacks last year. Justin Madubuike, 5.5. Odafe Owe had 3 sacks last year. A high draft pick they're hoping can pan out. Roquan Smith, they traded for, but he's more of a linebacker in coverage. When it comes to, he had 103 tackles, 4.5 sacks, not bad because he does a lot for this team. Patrick Queen had 5 sacks. I worry about this team generating pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and really, you need to be able to sack the quarterback in the modern NFL. In particular, in this division, if Deshaun Watson is playing at his apex and you're playing against a healthy Joe Burrow, if you're not getting pressure on him, you're screwed. If he's in clean pockets, if he doesn't have people around him, it's going to be tough to win. I love their secondary with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Williams, who's been a great signing. Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame. They brought over Rock Yassin from the Las Vegas Raiders, who's good, not great, but he's fine. Maybe David Ojabo will be a guy that can help this team. He played at Michigan. He missed almost all last year, only had 1 sack, played in 1 game. He could be an X factor because he was very good in college, tore his ACL towards the end of his freshman season. So, they have the best place kicker in the NFL in Justin Tucker. I don't worry about that. He'll make them. And I like the back end of their defense. I love Roquan Smith. I still think linebackers aren't as important as they used to be, but if you have a good one, you appreciate it. Bobby Wagner was pretty damn good for Seattle for a long time. Roquan Smith was good in Chicago. He's good in Baltimore. But if I had to poke holes in one element of this team, it is their ability to get pressure on the quarterback. And Ojabo might be the X factor for the Ravens, like Darnell Washington could be for the Steelers. Owe has potential, but he needs to find it. Comparing the Steelers, Browns, and Ravens so far when it comes to just getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, the Ravens are a distant third, in my opinion. Because I just don't think they have the pieces to do it. Last year, the Ravens were 17th in overall team defense, which is good, not great. They had 48 sacks, which is very good, but they lost some of those players. Justin Houston is gone. He had 10 of them. We look at some of these teams. Denver, really good defense. Better, only had 36. New Orleans had 48. So sacks aren't everything. I get that. It's more about pressures. Getting the ability to get in a quarterback's face sometimes can be more important than getting sacks. But I'm telling you, it's imperative. And I just don't look at this team and see the pieces it takes to do it consistently. And it's about your opposition, who you're going up against. Joe friggin' Burrow in a clean pocket will murder you. Unless he's just having a really bad game like he did against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. Where he had a bad game, especially for his circumstance and the way we're accustomed to seeing Joey B play. But other than that, and the health of Lamar Jackson, which I don't worry about as much because I don't think their offense is going to be the same, and I don't think they're going to be the same stagnant, stupid offense that they normally play with Greg Roman. I love Baltimore. Baltimore has everything you'd want. Really good skill talent, an awesome quarterback, a smart offensive coordinator, a really good secondary, a strong offensive line. So there's going to be things you don't like about every team, of course. That's why I'm going through this, and you go through every team, what about that quarterback, or what about this? It's more prevalent. It's a bigger bullseye for me because the Baltimore Ravens are playing in a division where they need to be good. They need to win as many games as possible because in this division, one team wins the division, you make the playoffs. That's awesome, but how many other teams are going to make it? Again, I got to go through that exercise. I gotta figure that out and start with that process because that'll be another podcast before the season starts. But if you are getting pressure, if the opposing team's quarterback's just sitting in the pocket comfortable, you're in trouble. And you're not going to have a whole lot of fun because the other quarterback's going to torch you. And I love Marlon Humphrey, and Marcus Williams is a ball hawk, and Kyle Hamilton's been pretty damn solid since coming into the league. But you need to get some pressure. So we'll see, but I expect the Baltimore Ravens to be really good because I like their roster. And I think they've done more this offseason than they ever have in the first number of years for Lamar Jackson. Not to mention, I've hardly talked about Mark Andrews, who's been the favorite target of Lamar since he came in the league. Mark Andrews is still a great tight end. One of the best in the league. No doubt about it. 847 yards receiving last year, 5 touchdowns. And a pretty good blocker in his own right. And Isaiah Likely at 373, not bad for a number 2. They have Charlie Kolar, second season out of Iowa State. And they brought in Travis Vokalek from Nebraska. They got a lot of good tight ends. A lot of good college tight ends anyway. See what they can do at the NFL level. But I like the Baltimore Ravens. Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals made the AFC Championship game last year after making the Super Bowl the year before. It's been Cincinnati and Kansas City really since Joe Burrow entered the league to be a foil for Patrick Mahomes. But the Bengals came up short against the Chiefs, and the Chiefs went on to win the Super Bowl. So in saying that, the Bengals look around and said, what can we do to get better? Of course, we still have Joe Burrow, who they need to sign. Jamar Chase, last year's rookie deal. T. Higgins, last year, his rookie deal. Well, since he entered the league, no quarterback has been sacked more than Joe Burrow. Missed an entire season with a torn ACL. He's been through quite a bit. They've tried to build an offensive line that suits him, but they've never really done it. They've made signings in the offseason. They brought in pieces, but that's really what they're searching for. An offensive line that works. Well, they saw a left tackle on the market who played for the Kansas City Chiefs last year, who was really good, and they signed him. They gave him a lot of money. Orlando Brown Jr. is the new left tackle for Joe Burrow after being the left tackle for Patrick Mahomes last season. A great start for this team. They brought in Lyle Collins the year before. He battled some injuries. They still have Jonah Williams after he requested a trade. Alex Kappa they brought over from the Tampa Bay Bucks. Ted Karras, the former center for the New England Patriots. Cordell Volson is another guy they've had in-house for a while now. So I think this offensive line, it remains to be seen because it needs to gel. It needs to fit. I remember going into last season thinking the Bengals offensive line would be really good. And it turned out to be better, but still not all that great for Joe Burrow. But I think it's better, and I applaud them for doing it. They also were very active. Got Nick Scott, a safety from the Eagles. They re-signed Jermaine Pratt. They brought in Irv Smith Jr. to replace Hayden Hurst. Cody Ford, another offensive lineman, when healthy, he'll be available for the Cincinnati Bengals. And you got Sidney Jones for their secondary as some depth. In the draft, they got Miles Murphy from Clemson. Jordan Battle comes over from Alabama. They drafted Charlie Jones from Purdue, another receiver that could be an X factor for this team. And they got Chase Brown, a Canadian running back, coming over from Illinois. So again, this offense, really good. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Irv Smith Jr. Again, Charlie Jones, as I mentioned, could be an X factor. Joe Mixon took a pay cut to come back to be on this team. They had Chase Brown, who can come in on short yardage and catch balls out of the backfield. So they lost Samaje Perine, but you had Chase Brown, a younger version of him. And I think he was great in college. I think he'll be good in the NFL. There's not a whole lot of holes on this offense. And it's likely the last year for the three-headed monster of Chase, Higgins, and Boyd to play together. Chase is going to need a contract. Higgins needs a contract, and Tyler Boyd is the last year of his deal. I think they're going to keep Chase and Higgins, and Tyler Boyd will be the sacrificial lamb, and he will leave Cincinnati, although he's the longest tenured member. They're just not going to be able to afford him. If they want to keep the roster competitive, keep good defensive players, and maintain an offensive line that can protect their star quarterback after they pay him. Now, none of these deals are done yet. We got to remember, they're Cincinnati. They're one of the cheapest organizations in sports, in particular in the NFL. Maybe Chase, maybe Higgins, maybe Joe Burrow don't get long-term extensions done. I think they do, But again, it's Cincinnati. Who the hell knows? But offensively, this team has everything you'd want. Higgins is your 50-50 ball receiver. Jamar Chase can do it all, can create a 10-yard catch into a 60-yard touchdown in a blink of an eye. Tyler Boyd's your intermediate, third down, big catch guy. I mean, you look at their numbers last year. Tyler Boyd, number 3, 762 yards receiving, 58 catches. T. Higgins, 74 receptions, 1,029 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns. And Jamar Chase had 87 receptions for 1,046 and 9 touchdowns. Jamar Chase could have way better numbers if he didn't play with T. Higgins. T. Higgins could have much better numbers if he didn't play with Jamar Chase. But these guys don't complain. They want to win football games. They want to be successful, and they do it together. And I have a lot of appreciation for that. Because ego runs amok in sports like no other. People get hard-headed. They want to have their praise. They want to be the man. These 3 guys have maintained a relationship. They've maintained decorum, and they've maintained a just steady play with one another, respect, and they've done it since they came into the league. So credit to them. But offensively, I love the team. Now, Joe Burrow is not practicing. He's not at training camp currently, dealing with the calf issue where he was running and he just kind of dropped. Said he's going to miss several weeks. There's conjecture on how much time he's going to miss. You hear Jamar Chase this week saying, I don't care if he misses the first 5 weeks of the season if he's healthy later in the season. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he'll be ready for week 1. If I had to guess, he'll practice right before the season starts and he'll play week 1. I could be wrong about that, but you look behind him, the backup quarterback is Trevor Siemian. Trevor Siemian's been around the block. He's played for the Bears. He's played for the Vikings. He's played for the Patriots for a little bit. He's been a backup quarterback in a lot of different played for the Broncos originally. So he has experience as a starter, but he's definitely a backup. Jake Browning is behind him. So there's not a whole lot of depth. They don't have a great backup quarterback in Cincinnati. It's not a place where they spend a whole lot of money because Joe Burrow is their guy. He's their man. Like I said, I think he'll be ready for week 1. If he misses a game, it's not the end of the world. Defensively, look at this team. They lost Jesse Bates in free agency to the Atlanta Falcons, which you talked about. One of the best safeties in football. They knew they were going to lose him. They couldn't afford to pay him, but it's a major loss. They also lose Von Bell, who's been in the secondary for a long time. He has his ups and downs, but he's a good player, and they knew who he was. They lost Eli Apple, addition by subtraction. He's now with the Miami Dolphins. But you look at it, it's an entirely new secondary. Nick Scott comes in to replace Jesse Bates at safety. Dax Hill, who played in and out last year, is a first-round pick. They're hoping he can continue to improve. He's out of Michigan. He's played sparing last year. He's slated to be the starting free safety. Cam Taylor-Britt is going to be a corner, and Awuzie is on the other. So it's a new secondary trying to come together and figure each other out. Now, they still got Sam Hubbard returning, still have DJ Reader returning, BJ Hill returning, Trey Hendrickson returning, Logan Wilson returning, Jermaine Pratt returning. So pass rusher to the linebackers, this defense remained the same. They also added Miles Murphy, who was very good in college. How much he'll play this season, just with the amount of talent that this team has, we'll see. He had 6.5 sacks last year at Clemson. He had 7 in 2021. So I'd say a good pass rusher, not a great pass rusher, with 22 solo tackles, 2 pass defenses. So I think they look at him as a guy they hope can become a really good player. It's not set in stone yet. They also have Mike Hilton for insurance in the corner position. Jordan Battle, another strong safety, as I mentioned, they drafted out of Alabama, who's waiting in the wings. I think their defense is good, not great. They're spending money keeping Trey Hendrickson, adding Sam Hubbard. I like those. I think Trey Hendrickson is still really good. He had 8 sacks last year, which was down from the year before, but he can still play. I don't worry about him. He's getting more and more double teams. Sam Hubbard at 6.5 sacks. DJ Reader right in the middle of that defense, messing things up. Not a big sack guy, but he'll get in your face. Logan Wilson at will linebacker had 8 sacks, and he got a contract extension because he's a really good player. So this team is very good. Very good. They are going into the season, Zach Taylor and the Bengals, their only goal is to win the Super Bowl. 100%. And I would argue it's only going to get tougher for this team to win after this year. This is the last year of Joe Burrow's rookie contract. When you start paying a quarterback big money, the rest of your team suffers. The only argument where this doesn't work is where Patrick Mahomes, remember, he made all that money. People say this is a crazy contract. He is a bargain now. He's not even a top 5 paid quarterback in the league this season. Jalen Hurts, Herbert, Lamar, Dak Prescott, all these guys are making more money than Patrick Mahomes. His structure is better because it helps the team to bring in talent, and also Kansas City can find more diamonds in the rough than any team in the NFL. So I think it would be really important for the Bengals to find if Chase Brown can have a positive impact, or Myles Murphy, who makes no money on a rookie contract. If Nick Scott, who was on a team that made the Super Bowl last year, can come in and have a positive impact for the Bengals. Orlando Brown Jr., you just won a Super Bowl, have that motivation to go win another one and stick it to the Chiefs. I think that's the motivation for the Bengals this year. They are a team that loves to talk. They love to hear, they love to say things about the Kansas City Chiefs to get into their ear, whisper sweet nothings. I think they're going to be motivated for redemption. I think the Chiefs and Bengals play each other in Week 17, so towards the end of the season. But this team comes in this year, and I do think they're better than they were last year, despite the fact that I love Jesse Bates, and he's gone. And Hayden Hurst is a good tight end, and P. Ryan was a very reliable number 2 running back. They have Joe Burrow, and they have the weapons. They're going to be fine. And I think they're the favorite going in to win the division this season. However, I will add, the Bengals played the Ravens in the wild card game last year, if you remember, and Tyler Huntley started at quarterback for the Ravens. And the Ravens would have won that game if he doesn't try the quarterback sneak going over the top, and if he doesn't just go into the pile. He dived to get over the goal line stupidly. The ball becomes jarred loose, and it gets run back for a 100-yard touchdown, something like that. And they lost by like 5 points. That was the change in the game. Baltimore defensively completely shut down the Bengals. But they survived the game. They go on to beat the Bills in the divisional round, and they lose to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. But to me, the Bengals are still right there. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. They have one of the best rosters in the NFL. They have that chip on their shoulder. And they will be going into this season with the expectation that it's Super Bowl or bust. And they're going to have that feeling from the beginning. That's why I think Joe Burrow is going to play earlier in the year, because this division, the Browns aren't what they used to be. The Steelers are still a good team, and the Ravens are better than they were the year before. To me, Cincinnati knows it's going to be more of a tough test than in past years to win this division. Maybe it won't be, but I think it will be. That's the AFC North. That's the AFC North, and I want the Bengals without Joe Burrow. I do this for every team, so I want to do this just to stay consistent. The Bengals open up at the Browns. It's a division game. Week 2, they host the Ravens. Week 3, they host the Rams on Monday Night Football. And then they go to Tennessee. So I think Week 1 and Week 2 are more important than the next 2 games. You have a Rams team we'll talk about, but I don't think will be all that good. And a Tennessee team that, on paper, the Bengals are a whole lot better than. But to me, those first 2 division games are really important, and I think Joe Burrow will be active in them. That's it for today. Back to a regular show tomorrow with lots to get into. We're watching a lot of tennis. In Toronto at the men's session, currently in a rain delay, Milos Raonic is down a break to Mackenzie McDonald in the first set. Casper Ruud, the number 3 seed, lost the first set to Divovic Fokina. The women's draw, Iga Swiatek, 6-1 first set over Karolina Muchova, who won in Roland Garros. So she lost to Swiatek at Roland Garros in the final. So that's a rematch of the Roland Garros final. Jessica Pegula is already into the quarterfinal, winning 6-4, 6-love today. Some of the featured matchup, Marketa Vondrousova, Wimbledon champion against Coco Gauff, who won in Washington last week. You have Sloane Stephens, Rybakina. You have Fernandez, Daniel Collins tonight on center court. In the men's draw, Taylor Fritz, De Minaur should be fun. Gael Monfils has been playing well. Carlos Alcaraz and Andy Murray, Yannick Sinner later on this evening. And you also have NFL preseason tonight. First full week of NFL preseason, where we got Texans at Patriots. CJ Stroud makes his preseason debut, and the Vikings at the Seahawks. So we'll talk some baseball tomorrow. We'll get into a number of different things. So stay tuned for all that. Thank you for the support today. Thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying these NFL preview podcasts, because more are coming. Till next time, I'm Noah Warren. This is To The Point.